Hi everyone, thanks for joining today. My name is Ben, and today we're going to talk about query agents. This is the third time I'm talking to MeasureSummit, and I really want to thank the team for inviting me again. I hope you enjoyed the session. I am working as head of analytics at In Marketing We Trust. It's been 10 years now. I've been working across multiple global brands across the world. I'm really passionate about data, Google Analytics, Google Tag Manager, and I recently been exploring and learning about Google Cloud Platform, hence my talk today. So what are we going to cover today? We're going to talk about the new feature in BigQuery and the release at the end of January, I believe, which is BigQuery Conversational Agents that you can set up in the platform. So we're going to start with looking at what it is, see how it works. Going to do a bit of a reality check, what's not so good about it. I will show you an example of one of the agents that I built myself, and we'll finish with a comparison between LLMs and agents. If you have any question, please feel free to reach out. I will provide my email and LinkedIn. I would be happy to discuss this with you. Hope you enjoy the session. So what are we talking about? What are we looking at? Agents have been appearing in a lot of tools, and BigQuery has released this new feature. And the objective of agent is to give access to the data, to simplify the access of the data. Basically, what you would be able to do is ask your question in plain English, and then your agent will interpret what you said, generate the query that is equivalent to your question, runs the query against your dataset, and then provide an answer in different formats. So why now? Why BigQuery is becoming interactive? We see a shift from being a storage and SQL tool to more of a guided exploration. We have this need from the teams to be able to self-serve themselves without having the need of a tech team. The LLMs are also helping us breaking that last border between the complex schema of the data and the business logic. But everything relies on one big foundation. One big requirement is the fact that you need good data. And in addition to this, you also need better governance, better description, better metadata. Their promise is to have faster exploration for people like marketers or analysts that are less technical, and also having less requests coming from people to the tech team, right? But the trap is if definitions are weak or if data is not good, you will have bigger problems later. You have this shiny side of things, the agent, the UI, the chat, where you can ask anything you want and then the system figure out. Very easy to use. But there is the reality of it and how it functions. And unless you have proper configuration with the right governance, the right glossary terms defined, a list of verified queries, and good data, your agent is going to be as good as your configuration is. So the risk is to have bad agents answering questions, but giving you the wrong answers. This is a double-edged sword. The more access you give to people, the more risk you will have. More people can query the data, obviously, but more people can also misread the data. So for me, guardrails are really not optional. Governance should be part of the way you're going to design this agent. So how does the magic work? You have two layers. You have the data agents, the first layer. This is the wrapper. This is the configuration and the data and how questions are going to be interpreted. And then you have the conversation. So this is where you're going to open a new chat and ask the question. And this is where you get interactive with the agent. You will ask a question like, how much traffic did we get last week? And then the system will proceed those different steps. So first it's going to choose the table that is most relevant to your question. Then it's going to generate SQL query, and then it's going to execute it. Then it's going to give you the results plus some interpretation. As you can see in my screenshots, you can also inspect the SQL to confirm the logic, but also confirm the amount of data that you are processing. Let's go into the control surface, the how you configure your agents. So there are different configurations that you can do. So the first is what you would call the agent rule, which is you give him directions on what he should do, what he should never do, and clarify some of the questions. You will have the scope. So this is where you can share your different data sets. And then you have verified queries, which is very important. And then the glossary term, which is where you're going to define what is what and how you can interpret. So what are the verified queries, or what we would call also golden queries? It's really your safety rails. So the way I build my agents is as I'm doing some exploration and defining the queries that I want to answer all the questions, I generate those SQL queries that I will use as a configuration or as golden queries for my agent. And by doing like this, it's going to help me getting some consistency in the answer that I want. The other very, very important set of configurations that you need to do for your agents is what we call the glossary terms. I just gave an example here of terms of words that we could use that could lead to a misunderstanding, especially like just with GFO, right? Between the user, a new user, an active user, a session, a visitor, a visit. We need to make sure that when we're going to talk to the agents and we're going to refer to one of these words, he will know how to interpret it. So it's very, very important not only to have clear descriptions and names of all the tables and all the data sets that you're going to give access your agent to, but also include definitions of terms and adding some of the context. So the terms plus the verified queries are going to really give us the context and limit how the agent is going to be able to answer those questions and avoid any misinterpretation of it. They also include machine learning in the conversation flow. So you can actually use functions like AI forecast or AI generate. I haven't used personally those features yet, but I see the potential danger of it. Once again, giving powerful features to people that are not aware of how to set them up properly or to use them properly is for me very dangerous. Now, the reality check. The three ways I think this can go wrong. So the first one that I see is the confidence that we can have. If we ask an ambiguous question with terms that the agent is not understanding, we will have an ambiguous SQL query that will give us a result that will be misinterpreted. and that will lead to a bad decision. The power of an agent is not so much on the questions we're going to ask, but more on the configuration on how it's been done. The second issue that I see is the power. I do believe that not everybody should have access to everything. As I'm discovering Google Cloud Platform, as I'm training myself on BigQuery, I could already see the potential danger of me not using it the right way. And I can see that with agents, we are opening the doors to even more people that maybe shouldn't have access to data that hasn't been clean and prepared. So one of the things that I thought about a lot when I was creating my agent is to make sure that my agent has enough context, terms, and glossary and SQL queries, like golden queries, to limit the questions and the answers that it can also give. And then the last point, I think, is the price trap. So this is a chat so people can just like talk and ask, but you have to make sure that you don't end up querying years and years of data and terabytes of data, because cost is associated to the amount of data that you are querying. So one of the configuration that you should be doing as part of the agent is make sure that you have default periods. For instance, if the user is not saying anything, my agent will consider just the last week or the last month. You can also configure the maximum amount of bytes, and then at the GCP project, make sure that you have like alerts or systems that show you when your billing starts to explode. Now I'm going to show you one of the agents that I've done, and I will explain step by step on how I configured it and used it. So I built what I called a Google Tag Manager, Jed. So the idea was to be able to automate some of the audits that I was doing on Google Tag Manager. And I wanted to use a BigQuery agent for that. So the first thing that I have done is using Cloud Run. I created a script in Python that extracts my GTM container, all the tags, the triggers, and the variables, and store that into BigQuery. So I have the raw data, which corresponds to one versions of my container. Then, as I was setting up the different rules for my audits, what I've done is I created the SQL queries myself using the help of Gemini, directly writing in BigQuery, the equivalence of the queries for all the questions that I wanted to cover in my audits. Once I had those queries and I could validate that it was doing exactly what I wanted, I actually saved them in a table so my agent could refer to all the queries that I have, all the questions that I wanted to do for my audit with their associated golden query. Then I moved into the configuration of my agent itself. So I gave it a name, description. I provided the prompt or the rules of the agent. So things like what it can do, what it cannot do, but also the process he had to follow. So you should be asking the user this, and then you do that, and then you do the audits one by one, and you validate that the user accepts the output and validates the output of each of the tests that you are running. So all of that is specified in there. And then, as I said, my golden rules, my golden queries, instead of having to upload every single queries that I wanted in there, what I've done is I linked to my table that contains all my queries. And then my query assets with parameters. When the user starts using the agents, the first thing that it will ask is which client I'm going to audit, and then it will replace directly the variables in my queries. And then terms and the glossary, I mostly define those in my tables directly. I have very clear description. And then I was also thinking of adding more and more terms directly in my agents. But because I very limited the context of the data that he has to Tag Manager itself, and then I have my table that explain all the rules with the queries associated. I restrain my agent to only very specific things that it can action. So the more control I have on the data and the more governance I put in there, the more I control my agents and the answers that it's going to give me. The final boss. Why would you bother create agents? So one of the things I was asking myself when I started playing with the BigQuery agents is why would I need agents? Especially knowing that now you have LLM capabilities directly in BigQuery to help you write your queries themselves. You can also go in ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude, give a prompt, give directions, give the schema of your table, and it would build the SQL query that you want. So one point I was asking myself, oh, why would I use the agents versus the LMM? And what I think is interesting with the agent is the how much constraint we can put, because we limit the data that it can use to what it has access to. We can also limit the type of answers that it's going to give by providing a set of golden queries. We can also share it, which means that I could use it on different clients. Imagine that I have one agent set up for particular data sets, but it could be used on different clients, or it could be used by different teams. Um, but for me, the LLMs are a very good support for exploration and validation. So I would dissociate one from the other because I still think that we would use a Gemini to set up the actual agent before you use the agent. Um, I'm really wondering what you guys think and what are the different use cases that you found for data agents at the moment. What I'm thinking of implementing for my team is an agent for the SEO team and an agent for the paid team so they can access to Search Console data through BigQuery, or they can access Google Ads data through BigQuery and ask more advanced questions on the data directly. This is the conclusion. So the two things, I think my two takes on the agents as I was playing with it and exploring it is, well, the first thing is the giving access to agents to teams will ultimately give and provide more access to data in general and remove that bottleneck of the tech teams. But ultimately, you will need analytics engineering behind, because setting up the agents means also setting up all the definitions, having better governance, having better data sets, have a better clean data to ensure that when we ask the question, we have the right answer. And then for me, looking at the future, I do think that the winners are not going to be the teams with the best prompts. They're going to be the teams with the best definitions, the best queries, and the best governance on it. I'm really looking forward to see how agents would be applied in different tools in the GMP or GCP environment. So that's me. Thanks for attending the session today. I hope you enjoyed. Please contact me. I would be happy to discuss that with you. Or if you have any questions, shoot me an email and I will be happy to answer. Have a good day.